Welcome, Joe. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today.
Oh, Kelly, I'm so excited to be here.
For folks who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so I own Practice of the Practice. So we help people have a thriving private practice that they absolutely love. We started the Practice of the Practice podcast back in late 2012, over 1,200 podcast episodes where we just get to help people with all sorts of different angles for growing their practice. I was a practice owner until 2019 when I sold my practice, and that was a private pay practice here in Northern Michigan, had 13 clinicians. But I just knew that it was time to move on to just doing the consulting things. I'm also an author. I am a speaker. I'm on Simon Sinek's speaking team as well. And I'm a single dad with two awesome daughters that are 10 and 13. And we have lots of fun together and like stand up paddleboarding in the summer and playing board games in the winter.
Very cool. You mentioned being an author, and I see the sort of cover of your book behind you with Thursday is the New Friday. I feel like that's sort of like a fun place to kick off. Can you tell me a little bit about that concept and maybe how you see it applying to therapists in private practice?
Yeah, in writing the book or even writing the proposal for the book, I had to kind of think through some of my background. And I remember when I was at my freshman orientation for college, and we came for 3 or 4 days, and they do all these team building activities and stuff. And I remember sitting down with the advisor, and there's probably 4 or 5 of us making our schedule together. And I said, "Do I have to take classes on Friday?" And they're like, "No,
Hmm.
this is college. Do whatever you want." And so through all of college, except for one semester where there was a mandatory Psych 360 class that was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had no classes on Fridays. And so that was the life I lived through college. And then my first job, I negotiated to do a 4-day work week. It saved them time because I was driving back and forth about an hour to get to this clinic from their main clinic. And so they saved on gas money. So a lot of my career, even when I was in a traditional 40-hour work week, was the 4-day work week. And for me, that just was so helpful to have a Friday to kind of get stuff together, go through mail, get groceries done, to then have 2 full days that I could, go hiking, hang out with friends, like really recoup to be a really good therapist the next 4 days. So as I was working with my writing coach on just the proposal, that really became kind of the thing that I live all the time. And there's a lot of the neuroscience we can talk about. We can talk about the history of how we even got to this 40-hour work week, which is actually relatively new in human history. But yeah, that's a little bit of my background around it.
Yep. I'm curious if you use Fridays like for work admin at all, or does it really truly end up being sort of like that life admin and you're keeping work in that Monday through Thursday structure?
Yeah, so my schedule now is actually Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I work 9:30 to 3:30. And so those days are strong 9:30 to 3:30 because I want to walk my daughter to school. So I chose a life thing that is a non-negotiable, what we call a hard boundary.
Yep.
And her school starts at 9. So I walk her to school. We live a couple blocks from the school. Walk home. My sister lives in the neighborhood, so I get to walk with all the nieces as well.
That's so
And then go
sweet.
pick her up from school, which ends at 4 o'clock. So I've defined Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday as my really hard work days. On Mondays, I might do a little bit of email and check in with the team. But I would guess I probably do a total of an hour of work on a Monday. And then on Fridays, I usually have nothing on the schedule. I may
Yep.
have yoga, I may have a hike with a friend. But there's nothing that's scheduled or admin. And the team knows that, we work, 4-day work week. And so they're
Hmm.
not really sending Slack messages. Some people may choose to flex their time in a way that they may want to work on a Friday when it's quieter, and then maybe on Mondays they take some time off. But unless there's some sort of crises in the business, which is rare, once or twice a year, there might be a big thing that happens on a Friday. It genuinely is a 3-day weekend.
That's very cool. I think a lot of therapists sort of structure their weeks similarly of not seeing clients on Fridays. I know that I've been like that since the very start in my private practice, even when I first went full time and was really very much like in hustle building mode. But I think most of us end up using those Fridays as sort of like catch up days. And so I love that you're sort of like turning that on its head and instead just really fitting everything into those traditional 4 days. Um, I think I sort of did that like unintentionally when I first started. I had my only admin day as Fridays, and I ended up like oftentimes having plans or planning, like a 3-day trip, or a friend would be in town, or people wanted to get off early and go to happy hour or check out a museum or something in the city. And so I ended up having to add in an admin day on Wednesdays because I was like, nothing is getting done with me having all of my catch up being on Fridays right before the weekend there.
Well, and I think that it also, when you have a whole day for admin, you're saying I need to have 20% of my time be admin. And so I
Yep.
think even drilling into like, what is that admin? Is it progress notes? Well, then why aren't we using an AI platform that can help with that to speed up our progress notes? Is it
Hmm.
that we are doing all of our own marketing, all of our own networking? Maybe we should outsource to an assistant for 20 or 25 bucks an hour to do that. And so I think that even just when I hear people say I spend all day Friday admin and they feel really proud about that, it's like, well, why are you doing most of that? I bet half that work we
Yep.
could easily outsource and automate through so many great systems that there are now, and then you could just go have fun on Fridays.
I love that. I'm curious. So I know you said that you had like a pretty big group practice that you ended up selling. What was your role at that point before you sold when you kind of had like 13 clinicians? Were you kind of more admin focused then, or what was that sort of like for
Yeah,
you?
so I really recognized in the last probably 18 months before I sold it, that I was very disinterested in therapy. I had two clients at the time. They were clients that literally the day that I turned off the lights, it was like the furniture's moving today, and they're like, "Can we squeeze in one more session?" And it's like I signed a non-compete with the buyer, specifically so I couldn't keep doing therapy because I just knew these
Yep.
people. You get those clients that they're making progress, but they kind of need to have those wings to go off into the world. But I
Yep.
knew that like therapy wasn't for me at that time, and I just needed to kind of regroup. So a lot of my admin, I mean, I was running the group practice in probably an hour a week. I always wanted to be the final sign off on payroll, with fraud and embezzlement. So many of my friends that have higher level practices and businesses said, try to have your eyes on the money. So I
Hmm.
had my eyes on the money. And then really it was, how can I be the face of this business? So every other week, I or one of my therapists would go to the local radio station that was right next door. It was talk radio. We were like the call in therapist and we'd give them ideas. And initially it was me every single week going there. And then over time, it was like the first Tuesday, Steve talks about addiction. Like the third Tuesday, Nicole talks about toxic families and women's transitions. And so it was like I would introduce the team into these like media outlets and then
Yep.
they would get trusted and then they could kind of run with it, which then became valuable to the person that bought it because it wasn't all reliant on me. So many sellers are like, yeah, I have this $1 million business, but half the money that comes in is somehow reliant on them, either as the admin, the operator, or as the clinician. And so the
Yep.
value of the business just tanks at that point.
When you set out and started your private practice, did you know at the time that you eventually wanted to build a group practice and then eventually sell, or did that sort of take you by surprise throughout your career?
What's really funny is, so I would answer that in two different ways. When I started the practice, I thought, okay, I want to just pay off student loan debt,
Hmm.
and if I can have another $1,000 a month, that can go into buying a new mattress for the house, or updating our closet, or paying down the car, or student loan debt. It was really just like a side gig. What's interesting is I found a note probably a year before I started my practice where I had run the numbers on how I could make 100 grand a year off a group practice. And I had
Yep.
completely forgot about that when I started the practice. It was like I had heard something or ran something, or I don't know even where that came from because I wasn't thinking about that consciously. But then
Yep.
within a couple of years, I saw, oh my gosh, like this thing that was a pipe dream for me when I worked at CMH, now I've achieved without even like having this note in front of me every day.
Yep. When you were a solo clinician, where did you get most of your clients from for private practice?
Yeah, so at that time in northern Michigan, so I'm in Traverse City, which is a tourist town on the water, mid-sized town, pretty counselor saturated. We have three satellite campuses here from major universities that are kicking out therapists each year. There weren't many people on Psychology Today. So Psychology Today at the time, I would probably get one a month from that.
Hmm.
And then I really doubled down on my SEO. And granted, this was 2009, 2010. People just weren't putting time into their websites at the time. And so I ranked number one for counselor near me. Uh, I need help with anxiety. I have angry kids, like all these different terms that we worked on that people were searching. And each of those terms would give us one or two clients a month where Then as a solo practitioner, and this was my side gig, I was full time as either a foster care supervisor or working at the community college. So
Yeah.
this whole time it was 40 hours a week plus like a Monday, Wednesday in the evenings or some lunch hours. I just kept getting more referrals than I could do anything with. And really the group practice wasn't like, I'm going to start a group practice. It was, I just have a lot of referrals and I'm supervising this guy, Steve. Hey, Steve, I talked to my lawyer. You want to come on as a 1099 with a profit split? And he's like, sure, I'll do Tuesday, Thursdays since you aren't in the
Yeah.
office then. Very organic. I would do it much different now. But I do think that at the time it worked really well.
I think it's really cool too to sort of see how you were doing SEO. So I started my practice and really filled the caseload primarily with Instagram. And I briefly had an associate working at my practice, and long story, but ultimately decided the group practice ownership was not for me. I had been coming from supervising a team of like 60 folks in the nonprofit space and was
Wow.
like, I thought it was going to be, I don't know, just sort of like easy free money of like, she'll see her clients, I'll get, 40%, done deal. And it was a lot more work than that. But I think what's interesting is that when you invest in a marketing platform like SEO, it isn't so linked to you, right? Kind of similarly to bringing your therapist onto like the radio show, right? And so people may discover you, they might discover your practice, they might discover Steve. And so it is a little bit easier to sort of fill your clinicians' caseloads than with something like Instagram, where people kind of become quite attached to you. And of course, you can hype up your other therapists, you can refer them that way, you can maintain hard boundaries that you don't have a wait list or anything. And sometimes that can be helpful. But with group practice owners, do you primarily suggest that they really work on SEO to fill their caseload, or what are some tips you have there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that strategy was really good, back in 2010, 2011, and even a couple years ago. I think right now, um, there isn't a linear way anymore that people find that they find you. It's not like they opt into an
Hmm.
email list, they get this drip campaign, and they're like, "Oh, I want to do therapy." No, it's like they get in a fight with their spouse as they're about to jump into bed while that person's brushing their teeth. They like search therapist near me, couples counselor near me, and then they maybe submit, I want to have a 15-minute intake call tomorrow. It's not always SEO. I would say that we don't have to be everywhere, but we need to be a handful of places. So we
Yeah.
need to have a good Google business, have good pictures of your office, spend time on there. If our clients choose to give us a review, great. We know that Google at the time of this recording is purging out any like colleague reviews. And so
Hmm.
that's just like a waste of your time at the time of this recording. We know that SEO really isn't going away. We want to maybe use AI to speed that up, but we don't want to just have AI write a bunch of articles for us. Like Google's smart enough to figure that out. We want to do local networking with people that are good referrals. So, if you're really into mindfulness, connect with yoga teachers. See if you
Yeah.
could, for the first Friday every month, host a meditation and self development class at their yoga studio that's a little different than maybe what they usually offer. So we want to have this multi referral approach, and it's ever changing. And so we have to be looking at the numbers, we have to be looking at the data, we have to be asking clients, how'd you hear about us? Even just boosting a couple posts on Meta, or doing a Google Ads campaign. Do some A/B testing. You say, okay, I'm going to put in 20 hours a month and $500 into this, 20 hours a month and $500 into this. Let's just see which one wins.
Yeah.
Because the way that the algorithms work changes. You know that with Instagram being one of your primary
Totally.
things. You're constantly having to learn what's working, what's not working, and your strategy from 2 years ago on Instagram, I guarantee, is different than how you're thinking about it now. And so we just need to make sure that we know, okay, here's the 3 to 5 things we're working on. What are the basic numbers we're looking at in regards to, is it working? And then is it changing? Are we seeing numbers drop in certain areas? Well, we either need to try new things there, or we need to say, let's put our efforts into something else.
Hmm. I sort of love how you're describing marketing, because that's really how my brain works a lot too. Of It's really fun to sort of see the different puzzle pieces and figure out how they connect together and where you can optimize and make little tweaks. I think that you really have to take sort of like an investigative approach with marketing sometimes. Is that something that came naturally to you, or is that like a skill you sort of had to hone over the course of years of running and owning multiple businesses?
I think I in life just tend to be someone to be like, let's try it. Why not? Like, okay, we
Yeah.
try something. Like, I mean, I was like, I want a new hobby, and I started curling, and it's like I did that for like 3 years, and then I tried improv, and improv was more fun than curling. So I joined an improv group. So it's like, I think I do tend to have a more experimental mindset. As I was working on Thursday as the new Friday, it's interesting to see also societally how the industrialists gave us a prescriptive model. You start here, you get a Model T at the end. It's very like assembly line. We think about job descriptions, how those, used to be written, where it was very like, here's exactly what you need to do. We needed that. That wasn't something that, before really the Industrial Revolution, that we had such kind of rigid expectations and outcomes that was needed for human development. In a post-industrialist world, the metaphor is no longer prescriptive, but more of a menu. So we're going to
Hmm.
try this from the menu. We're going to try that. So in our personal lives, when we're looking at the weekend, even just saying, okay, I'm going to try having green tea and reading a novel on Saturday morning for an hour and telling my kids to just be quiet for an hour, and see if I feel a little bit more prepared going into my work week. So let's test some of those things out personally. The same is true with our marketing, with even how much we run the business. When I do consulting with owners, oftentimes I say to them, you have three roles and you get to decide how much you're in each role. You're the
Hmm.
owner, you're the operator, and you're the clinician. So you can decide, do I want to do clinical work? Do I want to do clinical supervision or not? Do I want to be operating and thinking about the marketing and the management of this or not? Do I want to just be a silent owner? Do I want to be an active owner? Do I want to be setting the vision? Or do I want to bring other owners in to help with that? And so I think when people start to feel that freedom that, okay, I've created something, it's a beast I didn't intend to create, and I can change that over time to align with changes in my life, changes in my family, changes in my personality, then it becomes less of a trap where there's that burnout that people head towards. And they realize they have a lot of choice in how they run their practice.
I'm curious if that's something that you see a lot of therapists struggle with and make wrong, especially on that sort of like losing the identity as a therapist piece for group practice owners. I'm curious what that was like for you as well to sort of make that transition and really say, I don't really want to be doing therapy anymore. It's okay that I own this business. It's okay that, I'm consulting and coaching other therapists in private practice, but this isn't something that I sort of like have to hang on to and own for the rest of my career.
Yeah, I think there's a couple times that there's big identity shifts like that. The first one was when I left my community college job to do my counseling practice and podcasting and consulting full time. And it was so interesting because I remember this moment going to the YMCA to work out on like a Wednesday at 10:30. There's all
Hmm.
these old guys in the locker room and me, and I'm like, these guys probably think that I like don't have a job, I'm unemployed. I like all these different narratives of like, you're not working, so you must like be trash. So it was just
Yep.
such a like terrible thing I had to deconstruct. And first it was like, these old guys could care less about me, like, uh, and it's like, there's plenty of entrepreneurs, there's plenty of people that work overnights that it doesn't
Yep.
matter. But I still remember like feeling like, oh, they probably think I'm unemployed. I almost want to like announce like, no, I have a job, but it was like such a weird, toxic way of thinking. The other time was when I was deciding not to do therapy anymore. I wrote, as much as a second grader can write a paper about wanting to be a psychologist in second grade. It's like my dad was
Yep.
a school psychologist. That was something that I always kind of had as something I wanted to do. And, throughout grad school, thought I wanted to do like wilderness therapy. And then to find that maybe this thing that I did, I enjoyed when I did it, but also wasn't maybe my lifelong career, was a huge shift. And so I had to then go to like, why did I go into therapy in the first place? And it was to help people. It was to,
Yep.
make a difference in the world, to, say, hey, I don't like certain things in the world and I want to make that better. Um, I can still do that. It's just different. I have a different platform where, we're podcasting, we're consulting, we have a membership community of 300 plus practices that we help. Those are things that I'm still doing the core that got me to therapy. I think that was a good shift for me to understand that even if I'm not doing therapy, I can still do the things that brought me into therapy.
Yep. Where do you think that that judgment sort of comes from? Like, do you think that for most therapists, kind of making that shift, it is just sort of like that internal, what does this mean about me, or what are people going to think, or is it sort of more external of like, will therapists who you coach not trust you as much, or if you're a group practice owner, will your clinicians sort of think that you're just in it for the money now and that you don't know what it's like to actually be a therapist anymore?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of those things do come from the stories that were told from society. So,
Yep.
I mean, my individual story, I was raised Catholic. My dad's Catholic, my mom's Protestant, so I had a fairly open-minded Christian upbringing. But a lot of the story from both my parents, who are both firstborns, and me being the firstborn, and me being the firstborn of all the cousins, was
Mhm.
you have to look out for other people. You have to set an example. You have to be a model, kind of model citizen, model cousin, model brother, model son. Um, went through the Boy Scouts and was an Eagle Scout. So it's like achievement was a big thing in the narrative I received. My dad also was a behavioral psychologist, so I had star charts and we set goals, and those things are, in retrospect, there was things I had to undo for my own emotional just grounding. And I was set up to dream really big in a way that a lot of people don't get. And so it's
Yep.
like that two sides of the coin thing that, like Alan Watts often talks about in Taoism, that, the Tao is both dark and light. And it's like those things that are biggest challenges are often the things that give us differentiation from other people. And so I think having that sense of I can have sadness around some of the things that I was brought up with that made me feel like I had to achieve in order to be worthy.
Yep.
Like that's a valid thing to say. That's not something I want to pass on to my daughters. And I got some really great skills out of it too that have helped me be successful. So I think that when we think about that, when we deconstruct our own stories, you know, depending on where people were raised, their socioeconomic status, how much privilege their family has, there's all sorts of stories we take in. And as an adult, then we have to say, am I going to buy into this story moving forward? So, to your
Yep.
question of why it's hard, I think that our stories and the things that society has taught us then force us to confront those things. And as therapists, most of us want to confront our own
Yep.
issues. We want to be better people. But the problem with that sometimes is, when does that end? When do we stop and just say, wow, I'm good enough, even if I
I'm
don't do
enough.
anything
Hmm.
more? Even if my Instagram doesn't grow by 20% next year like I want it to, I'm still a good person and I'm helping the world. We can set these goals. We can say, I want to achieve these things, while also saying, wow, I get to be human. Like, that's amazing. Like, look at what we get to do. This
Yep.
is insane. And, look at the time period of history of humanity we came into. So we can go macro and just look big picture and have appreciation and gratitude. We can go micro. But I do think that our natural posture as therapists is to evaluate, change, improve, work on. And sometimes we just need to kind of sit in it and say, you know what, like I'm okay how I am, and I can also have goals for the future that I may want to work on.
Yep. Very cool. What do you think sort of like are some signs that a therapist might be ready to step into group practice ownership, or, that they're being called to do it, or that they would enjoy it?
Yeah. We're actually, at the time of this recording, in the next week, we're doing, which probably by the time this goes live will be done, we're doing our group practice launch week. So this is like top of mind for me right now, because I'm doing a
Mm,
bunch of webinars all about, like, when are you ready to start a group practice? There's a couple numbers that I think make it easier. I don't think that it's like
yep.
hard and fast. If you're 60% full, I would say now is the time to hire.
Yep.
And we say 60% because if you just think timelines, so say you posted today, you work really hard, you make a good job description, you say, I want to hire a child therapist because I don't see kids, but I'm getting a lot of referrals around that. And you take applications for 2 to 4 weeks, you get some good ones, you start interviewing people in a couple weeks, and then that person, if they're coming on full time, which they probably wouldn't if you're just starting, but they may have to rearrange their schedule a little bit.
Yep.
Realistically, if everything goes according to plan, that person might be in between 6 to 8 weeks from today.
Yep.
So if you're at 60% full now, in 8 weeks, how full do you think you're going to be? You're probably going to be like 90 to 100% full.
Yep.
And so 60% is what we say when you're starting a practice, but also once the practice gets going as a group practice, when across the board your clinicians are 60% full, that's when we want to start looking at adding some more clinicians in as well. That's earlier than most people think. I think that also people overestimate how important it is to have a certain number of referrals coming in.
Hmm.
I remember when I hired this lady, Nicole. So Nicole worked full time at community mental health. She was staying at community mental health. She wanted to pay off student loans or save up for vacations, and said, you know what, I can do some Friday evenings. I can do some Saturday mornings and maybe Sunday mornings. I bet I could probably do anywhere between 6 and 10 clients, a weekend. And I was like, man,
Yep.
that is going to be busy for you, but whatever, it's your life. So she signs the contract. About a month before we start posting on, and she had CMH sign off on it because she was supposed to be like 24/7 available. So
Yep.
she was able to have them sign off on that. So we post on the website, she's joining on this date. We start, we had a whole system of how people could book before the person even came in. So on day one, hopefully they were full. Well, I didn't realize just how connected she was in the community. Her
Hmm.
parents were real estate agents. Her parents were members of the yacht club. Day one, she was completely full. She had 8 sessions on her first Saturday. Her
Yep.
network was completely different from mine. And so if we had just said, okay, from the phone calls Joe's getting in mental illness counseling, we could probably get her, 2, maybe 3 new clients on day one. For her to be able to then go do it, we don't really see how much that network of that new person is actually going to help your business.
Yep.
So I think understanding that side of it. And the last area I would say is just looking at your risk tolerance. So sometimes people think, okay, yeah, like I'm going to bring on, usually now a W-2 is what's recommended. Okay, there's all these things I got to pay for. I'm going to have to pay for payroll taxes and all these things. I mean, if you use something like Gusto, like they'll set it up for, free for you. Or,
Yep.
when you do their, for, I think they do like 60 or 90 days free. Like you're not paying that all at once. You're not paying like a $60,000 salary all at once. You're not paying whatever you're paying them. And so as that money comes in, you can have W-2s that then you pay per hour. I mean, McDonald's does that. And
Yep.
so to even just say, okay, I'm going to pay this much per session, you're going to get paid $65 a session, whether we're charging 115 or 195. That attracts better people typically right now.
Yep.
um, and to say, what's my risk tolerance? Do I have money saved up in regards to a couple months of the kind of expenses of the practice? Do I feel like I'm going to be up at night because I don't have enough clients for this person, even though we said she's just an hourly? And so that risk tolerance evaluation, I think, is really important as well.
Yep. When you are hiring therapists or talking to therapists about hiring therapists, are you sort of like, I guess it's like that marketing part of their job description? Is that like an explicit expectation that they network, they, show up in the community, they do things to sort of fill their own caseload? Or is that something that sort of happens like by accident of just kind of bringing on the right, like ambitious sort of go getters onto the team?
Yeah. So in our group practice launch program, it's a 6 month program where people hire usually by month 3, but we guarantee within 6 months they'll have their first hire. And so we walk them through week by week. They have a training, and then we have a live Q&A around that training. In that, we talk about job descriptions a lot. What we typically recommend is right now, the way the IRS does things, that most of the time a W-2 is going to be, the best type of hire instead of 1099. So it just
Yep.
reduces your risk. And that instead of doing a percentage base, that you're doing a flat fee. You think about who's being attracted. It's people that want to have a set, predictable amount of money. They're not the entrepreneur types, hopefully. So
Yep.
we want to have a flat fee for your clinical work, and we want to have a flat fee for your non-clinical work. So meetings, marketing, blogging, going on local radio. So that's usually going to be, $20 to $25. Someone's not going to join your practice because you have such a great non-clinical rate. It's more of a way of saying, okay, if you have to come to a staff meeting, yeah, you get $25 for that. Your note taking is included in the price of what we're paying for your clinical work. So we're not going to pay,
Yep.
if it takes you 2 hours to do notes, you're not getting paid for that. Um, so I think that it's important to make sure that in the job description, we outline the types of things that helps a practice grow. Just like in relationships, we don't compare what we want our relationship to be to toxic relationships. We say, what's a normal
Yep.
relationship? We have good communication. We love each other. We give each other a kiss when we, say goodbye, whatever. We want to say what's going to help this practice grow. what's our ideal. So we probably want someone that will engage in networking activities, once or twice a month, that they're growing in their confidence around media, that they're contributing kind of thought leadership in the community to parent teacher organizations or to blog posts. And to kind of say, 5 to 10 hours a month, maybe non-clinical marketing work. And then you want to look at what's each person's talent. Do we want everyone to be on local radio that's in your practice? You may have 5 people that are really good at local radio and the other 10 are terrible. Sure, we
Yep.
can coach those people up, but who do we want to be the face of your practice? We may have other people that are amazing writers and they love it and they have a journalism degree. We should have them blogging for you. Like, and so we can
Yep.
kind of find each person's superpower, but we do want that job description to be broad enough to say, here's the kinds of things we may need. And we want you to know that that may be part of your non-clinical work.
I love that. I think that it's so huge too in terms of like being the group practice owner and not feeling like everything falls on you,
Yeah.
right? You have to write all the blog posts or hire a virtual assistant to do them or whatever. You have to do all the networking and talk about your different therapists and be connected to people of all these different niches. I think that that just really like sets therapists up for failure because it's so much pressure. And it's really hard to do 100% of the marketing for somebody else in a field like therapy where it is so personal, right? Like
Yeah.
people want to refer to people they know, to people they trust. And so I think that that's huge that you're sort of like empowering group owners to do that.
Well, and it devalues your practice. I mean, a growing area for me has been I've been a business broker for a number of practices to play matchmaker with people that are selling their practice and people that are wanting to expand or buy practices, and to really look at what buyers. And we're not, and some of the buyers that I've worked with are big investment groups. Other ones are just, hey, you have an autism practice here that's in 15 states, and I have an autism practice here that's not in those 15. Like, I want to buy that up so that I can then have that team faster. And so, the more that the owner is involved, the less valuable the practice is. So it's
Yep.
like every year, if you're just like, how do I put less into the practice and outsource more or automate more, to replicate yourself, the more valuable your practice is.
Which is, I think, like so opposite of what most of us like achiever types were taught, right? It's
Yeah.
almost like, how do I work harder to be more successful? And it seems like the key, at least in terms of success being selling the practice, is really to force yourself to step out of that mindset.
Yeah, totally.